Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.
Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast brought to you by Vanta. Vanta helps you save time, money, and build customer trust, all by centralizing program requirements and evidence collections for frameworks like DORA. If you want to manage risk and prove security, then head over to vanta.com/fintechtimes to learn more. And we are here. We are back. It is January. We are, it is very much 2025 right now, and I'm here as ever with Francis. How are you doing today, Francis? We are sadly a man down already in the year, but it's fine. We'll live with it. How are you doing?
I feel like it's almost to be expected given the weather. It's so cold right now that it really doesn't surprise me that Tom's unwell. I think, to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if next week one of us is unwell as well. It's just been absolutely freezing here. And although I want to say it's picked up a little bit work-wise, I think organisations are still in that sort of New Year slump for the time being. We're not really getting that much news, but it's definitely picked up from last week. So give it another couple of weeks and I reckon we'll be back in the normal flow of things. But yeah, it's been a relatively quiet one, but good nonetheless. How about you?
Yeah, no, pretty much the same. It has been absolutely freezing, and I always forget how much I hate winter until we hit January, and then everything's cold and freezy, and you have to go and freaking defrost your car in the morning. But yeah, I agree with you in fintech. It's still easing into everything, but I think in a couple of weeks' time we'll be wishing it was quiet again when all the news and insights all ramp up. But anyway, I'm sure we'll still find something to talk about. So what is your article today?
Absolutely. So today my article is all about stablecoins and FV Bank's latest offering expansion.
Awesome stuff. And I'm going to be talking about fintech in Scotland. I'm going to let you kick off with FV Bank and stablecoin offerings.
Thank you very much. So yeah, as I said, today is all about stablecoins and FV Bank's expanded offering. And what this will now be doing is including PayPal USD conversions into USD in real time. So offering an integrated suite of traditional and digital asset banking and custody services, this new expansion builds on FV Bank's integration of Circle's USDC in September 2021 and Tether's USDT in December 2024. So FV Bank strengthened its cross-border offering, allowing it to provide its global customers with a wider range of deposit options. Its account holders will be able to send outbound payments to beneficiaries in PayPal USD without the need to mint the stablecoin themselves or manage an external digital wallet. So by leveraging FV Bank's real-time processing capabilities, clients can initiate PayPal USD payments directly into their USD accounts, where FV Bank automatically debits USD, mints PayPal USD on demand, and delivers it near instantly to the beneficiary. So in terms of accessibility, stable coins I feel like have been a godsend in the cross-border market. They've always been a way to sort of fight inflation and the extremely high costs of sending money abroad that we've typically seen over the past 30 years or so. And I feel like what FV Bank has done has been quite a simple way in just broadening its horizons, I should say, and giving more access to more customers. I feel like we've said it a million times before, but it's worth saying that more options can only be a good thing for an organization. While on the surface, it might seem like it's a bit perhaps overcomplicating things, when it actually comes to the customer saying, how do I want to do this business? And seeing, right, that is something I recognize. I'd rather go with that than perhaps try something that they're not so sure about. I think that is just a surefire way to sort of ensure customer loyalty, and that if they use one service, they might then go on to use another one. But what I thought was probably most interesting, and this is probably what I wanted to talk about with you today, is it's the name PayPal. In my head, it's probably more well known than Circle or Tether. And I'm basing this off of my experience before working at the Fintech Times. PayPal was like one of those huge names that you just recognize anywhere. And sort of associating that now with the stablecoin market, I think will make people perhaps realize, oh, stablecoins, this thing that I perhaps didn't know. They're a bit scared of cryptos or whatever it might be. I feel like by integrating PayPal USD into its offering, it's now sort of aligning itself more with perhaps the traditional market, saying, look, we have this new offering. It's from sort of the same people that you know, but it's different. You should try it out and it will benefit you. So in that way, I feel like this offering is going to allow sort of for greater inclusivity. And I think it's just a very interesting move that, to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if we start to see other organizations sort of follow suit. And it does sort of beg the question, is sort of fintech only good until the traditional players sort of catch up? Or is like I say, this just sort of an intro pathway to stablecoins? Wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I think I really like what you've said about PayPal coming on board. I think so to touch on what you said sort of at the start, like, yes, I completely agree with you. Having more choice is always a good thing. And again, yeah, something that we do talk about a lot. And I think this is just another great example of that in, different various parts of sort of the financial and the fintech industry. Another example of seeing it today. And, I think it's really great to see that businesses are really embracing that need for choice, that need for different choice for their consumers or whoever they might be, whether they are, consumers or businesses or merchants or whatever. So that's always really interesting. What you said about PayPal is something that I really, really like. And it's sort of literally just dawned on me now that you've said that actually, yes, that's brilliant, because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of when it comes down to consumer trust and, consumer understanding about sort of maybe trying new things or trying things that they're not necessarily used to, it all comes down to marketing. And aligning with a big company like PayPal, I think you are 100% absolutely right that will do a lot of good in having people embrace stablecoins because they know what PayPal is. And I think, you're absolutely right in terms of PayPal goes beyond the fintech world. I think whenever someone asks me what I do and I'm like, oh, I'm a fintech journalist, and everyone goes, what's fintech? I always say, oh, it's like PayPal. So there's always that kind of association and connection there because people know what PayPal is. PayPal has been around for a very long time and pretty much everyone uses it. It's still, I think, one of the major payment methods. When you buy something online in e-commerce, you can almost always pay via PayPal. So it is huge. And I think aligning PayPal with stablecoins is going to be a really good thing to see if people kind of take it up a little bit more and use it a little bit more. So, but I will say, I guess PayPal did do their cryptocurrencies a while ago. I'm assuming that they still do that now. I haven't actually checked. But I don't know if that had a big impact as maybe it could have or it should have in terms of PayPal offering cryptocurrencies. I think I tried it, didn't really get anywhere with it and then kind of gave up after a couple of weeks. But, that's just me not understanding crypto. So I wonder if a similar thing could happen here. But I think having PayPal with stablecoins is going to be quite a big thing for consumers. And just in general, I think just to have such a big name associated with this kind of thing. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how it moves forward. Because again, it's kind of bringing stablecoins into an everyday scenario. It's making them a little bit more, for want of a better word, normal. You know what I mean? They're not this big scary thing that's gonna take all your money because you don't understand how to use it. It's just no, it's a stable coin. You can use it for these things. It could be really handy. It could be really good, and it helps you to manage your finances or do this better or do that better. Blah blah blah. So I think it's going to be a really interesting thing, especially building on that demand as well that we're seeing. And I do wonder if we're going to start seeing more uptake in stable coins just as we move forward. Maybe even other cryptocurrencies. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I'm really glad you brought this to the podcast today.
Sort of building on that, I think stablecoins they're sort of like an offering which differentiates themselves. While they are like a pathway into the crypto world, I think they also sort of break any bridges to that confusing side of crypto and this whole sort of hodling side of things and stuff like that. I feel like stablecoins are you don't need to worry about that side of volatility in the market so much as it's just an intro to this is what the crypto world can offer. It's not necessarily a crazy investment. It can just be a way to sort of simplify moving funds around. And I think when you look at it from that way, I think you're right. I think it will be quite impactful. funnily enough, I think I'm probably in the sort of 0.1% of people that don't actually have PayPal. And so I always find it really funny when I get a scam message saying your PayPal account has been hacked. And I'm like, well, funnily enough, mate, don't have it. So I don't think that's entirely true. But yeah, no, I think it is one of those things that I sort of think to myself, the amount of times where perhaps you're on Amazon, eBay, or whatever it is, and it says, how do you want to pay? And it's like, oh, I've got to enter my card details again. I mean, again, this is where we could see things like pay by bank. That's a whole nother story come in. But this is when it says enter your card details or it says pay by PayPal, I feel like that's always an option. So again, in this idea of sort of merging the two worlds of traditional finance, or sorry, perhaps you should say traditional fintech, because like you say, we always say that fintech is like PayPal, it's a paytech. So perhaps merging the worlds of traditional fintechs with crypto is sort of the way forward, and perhaps how we will see sort of adoption pick up. But yeah, thought it was an interesting topic. And
before we move on, I adore the phrase traditional fintech, and this is completely almost separate to the article, but that I think that's hysterical.
It's a
but
thing now, right?
but that's the thing. You're absolutely right. There is. Who'd have thought that one day there would have been such a thing as traditional fintech, and now here we are.
It's funny because I feel like it's, you know, when challenger banks were all the thing a couple of years ago, and then we had like challenging the challengers. And I feel like this is the new thing, is just like you've got your traditional fintechs.
Traditional fintechs. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. I just thought that's brilliant. Well, I bet either this year or next year, all the events will have a traditional fintechs. Like you've coined something now.
I think so. Do I need to get the coffee?
I think so. Yeah, there'll be like panels being like traditional fintech versus new wave. Blah blah blah. Anyway, moving on. No, that was a really great article. Thank you so much, Francis, for bringing that up. Some really interesting ideas. Moving on then to a very different kind of area of fintech, in terms of just fintech in general. Fintech Scotland's ecosystem has surpassed over 11,000 employees as fintech continues to boom in Scotland. So in its 7th year fintech ecosystem, Fintech Scotland has revealed that it has over 11,000 people working in the fintech sector in 2024, following an 8% year-on-year growth. And I just thought this is a really interesting one to bring up, because I always love talking about ecosystems that aren't necessarily like the main ecosystem, because I think, you know, a lot of the time, obviously, when we think about fintech in the UK, you automatically kind of think about London, and then that goes the same for like everywhere in the world that has like a particularly like booming or like a reputational like fintech ecocenter. But I always love kind of talking, I don't even want to call them like fringe ecosystems, because I don't think that's the right word for them, but ecosystems that aren't kind of like the main ones. I think it's always really interesting, and I think it's really important to like talk about them and kind of not necessarily promote them in that kind of way, but certainly just sort of know that, you know, a fintech doesn't have to exist in London to be sort of a valid fintech. So I think, you know, this fintech cluster in Scotland formed by this ecosystem has really led the charge in technology adoption. It led the charge in technology adoption and advocated for fintech partnerships with established financial firms. And there has been a tenfold increase in fintechs in the country since 2018, which is really fantastic growth. And this growth really underlines sort of the contributions that fintech are going to make in delivering the UK government modern industrial strategy, and also just really highlighting what I was saying before about the importance of having these different ecosystems, these different clusters, in order to sort of unleash the potential of different cities and regions. You know, like you could say this about any industry, but, you know, when we think about talent and finding the right people and finding the best people, they're not always going to be in the capital cities. They're not always going to be in these major hubs. Moving out into different locations is really going to have a lot of impact on your business, and trying to sort of find that variety of talent and find that variety of people. And just in general, I think, you know, we kind of talk a lot about different, you know, places to be in the fintech world and all these different ecosystems, all these different hubs, and how everything's kind of booming and stuff, and it's all going really well. But I think it's just really exciting to see fintech popping up in places that aren't necessarily the major places to be. You know, like in Wales, we have a really vibrant, you know, insurance insurtech sector when it comes to fintechs. And, you know, Scotland obviously has its own really great ecosystem, and there's a real buzz about kind of like fintech in Scotland. And the same could be said all over the globe. When you think about places in America, places in Europe, places in Africa, the Middle East, it's all about like having those different locations and really making them work and having the commitment to make them work. And I think it's a really exciting thing to see, especially when you can kind of see a direct success story like with Fintech Scotland, and how they you see the visible growth that it's happened, and all the different companies that they can kind of go and say, oh yeah, well, we did this and we helped this and they've grown, blah blah blah. So yeah, I think I always just really love talking about sort of like localized areas. So the kind of thing I wanted to talk about with you today, Francis, was kind of more about what do you think we should kind of be doing as an industry over the next, maybe, I don't know, like year or so, whatever, this year, 5 years, 10 years, blah blah blah, to kind of really boost these sectors? Do you think that it's still important to have these sort of little pockets of clusters of fintechs, as we're moving forward, especially kind of as we're getting into the sort of next level of the fintech industry, like we were just saying with traditional fintech, which again, I still love. So I mean, like, what do you think about kind of the whole ecosystem as a whole? Do you think we should be focusing a lot more about all these like little fringe areas, or is it just, does it not matter and it's just, fintech as a whole is what it is?
No, I think these smaller like fringe areas are really important, and I think interestingly there was some research from Innovate Finance recently which found that in terms of global fintech investment, the UK was only second to the US, or the US was by far first, I think. But in terms of, I think it's like the next 3 or 4, like in terms of investment, the next 3 or 4 after the UK, European countries combined, they didn't match the UK's level of investment. And of course, like a big chunk of this is in London, in England. But I think it is important to recognize the impact that, the smaller clusters are having on the region. And I think it goes to show that no matter, I feel like people that, or organizations and sort of innovators that are perhaps in quieter areas that don't have the access to, big cities like Leeds, London, Manchester, stuff like that. I think that, or like Glasgow or Edinburgh as well, like these places in Scotland, it's important to ensure that people in perhaps the north of Scotland can access a cluster in the region. They don't need to go all the way down south to the south of England. But yeah, no, I think it's important to have these different areas in terms of accessibility, and to have local areas to sort of share ideas and network. And I think in turn, we are going to sort of see snowball effects as sort of smaller clusters gain momentum, especially now that we're sort of getting into a time of sort of more economic stability. Like the instability that we've seen in the past couple of years is sort of fading away a little bit. I'm not saying it's gone completely, but as investors are going to be more likely to put money into new ideas, I think these smaller clusters really have a lot of potential.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the key word there is potential. It's how, what can we do? How can we support them? And I think that potential is always the most exciting thing. I think that's one of the things that is so exciting about fintech in general, is that there's always the potential to do better. There's always the potential to do more interesting things. And by nurturing these little ecosystems, I say little ecosystems like they're little, they're not, but like nurturing these ecosystems, nurturing all these different clusters that are outside of kind of like the major hubs, I think is always going to bring in a lot of value to the fintech industry, and just in general, I think make things just a lot more exciting and a lot more different. It's about, why would you do anything outside of, the major hub? It's all about change of scenery, change of pace. Like how can you make things different? How can you make things better? How can you do it with the talent that you have, the resources you have? It's all different, and it all just leads to variety, which again kind of leads to that idea of more variety in solutions and products and things like that. So it's all very exciting and it's all very interesting. But anyway, that does bring us to the end of our discussion today. So thank you so much, Francis, for talking to me about these articles. If you want to hear anything more about the fintech world, head on over to fintechtimes.com. There's plenty more news and insights over there. But very quickly, we will do what I learned this week. So each week we learn so much new information about the fintech world, being on the Fintech Times editorial team, that we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So like we said at the start, it's been a quiet time, but I think there's still some learnings to be had, Francis. So Francis, what have you learned this week?
This week, I've learned that global network tokenized transactions are set to double by 2029, according to Juniper Research.
Fantastic. And this week, I also learned that dLocal has secured an FCA payment institution license to operate in the UK, which is very exciting. But anyway, Francis, thank you so much for joining me again. Hopefully, we'll get the whole gang back together next week. But until then, I will catch you on the next one.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.